There are injustices within a family that cut deeper than any betrayal from the outside world. Strangers may wound us, but when it is your own flesh and blood, the child you raised with every ounce of your youth, who turns away and treats you like a stranger, that is no ordinary wound. It is humiliation, a slap across the face of dignity. Today, I want you to listen carefully to the story of Helena Brooks and ask yourself, if one day your own child stood in front of you and pushed you away from the doorway of its happiness, would you still believe in the word family the way you once did? Stop for a moment. If you believe every mother deserves respect, then stay with me until the end of this story, because what you are about to hear will not let you remain calm. That day, the whole town of Charleston was buzzing. The great church on Main Street was dressed in white roses and golden candlelight. It was the wedding day of Edward Brooks, Helena's only son, the boy she raised with her weary hands, the boy she once proudly told the neighbors about. My son went to college. He is successful now. My hard life was worth it. But she could never have imagined that the day she thought would be her proudest would become the most humiliating nightmare of her life. Helena wore her pale blue dress, old but neat, and the shoes she had bought 5 years earlier. Her graying hair was tied in a careful bun. In her hands, a small bouquet she had cut herself from her garden, simple, but filled with a mother's love. She approached the church door, her heart beating fast, waiting for the moment she could hug her son and wish him a lifetime of happiness. But at the very steps, the wedding manager held up a hand. "Sorry, ma'am, your name is not on the guest list." Helena thought she had misheard. She reached into her pocket and showed him the invitation sent weeks ago, but the man shook his head. "We were told only special guests may enter. You can stand outside if you want." She froze. Special? What about 40 years of motherhood? She had sold her most cherished piece of land to pay for Edward's tuition, and now she was being cast aside like she meant nothing. Trembling, she looked for Edward, hoping he would explain, but the heavy wooden doors of the church slammed shut, sealing her away from the organ music and the applause inside. Imagine it, your own mother turned away from your wedding, shamed in front of neighbors. Could you bear it? While Helena stood stunned, a strange woman slipped a folded note into her bouquet and disappeared into the crowd. Helena opened it. The scrawled words were clear. "Be careful. They are hiding a terrible truth from you." Helena's heart pounded. Who had written this? Who were they? Her son? The new bride Clara? Or both? She looked up and through the church window saw Edward in his black suit, smiling broadly, holding Clara's hand. His eyes glowed with affection for his bride, but when they flicked across to his mother outside, they turned cold, like he was staring at a stranger. In that instant, Helena felt the whole world abandon her. Do you know the most painful thing in life? It isn't poverty, it isn't illness. It is when you dedicate your entire existence to raising your child, sacrificing everything, and in the end, that child denies you in front of the world. Helena had stayed up countless nights sewing clothes to pay for Edward's books. She had hidden her joint pain so she could save money for his college. She ate cold rice and wore worn-out clothes just so he could eat well and dress nicely. And today, in return, she was told, "Sorry, you are not on the special list." That phrase was like a verdict. Helena had been turned into an outsider in her own family. If you are hearing this, I want you to pause and think of your own parents. What did they sacrifice for you? Do they deserve to be excluded just because they are not considered special compared to outsiders? Never allow a mother or father to suffer the humiliation that Helena Brooks endured. Call them, hug them, speak a kind word before it is too late. Helena stood outside the church throughout the ceremony, listening to the bells, the cheers, the blessings shouted inside. Each sound was another knife twisting into her heart. When the guests poured out, she turned silently away, unnoticed. Edward led Clara down the steps, glanced briefly at his mother, then turned his head as if she were nobody. In Helena's heart, the sacred bond of motherhood tore apart. But instead of collapsing, a fire of fury ignited. She clenched the strange note tightly in her hand. Whatever it meant, she knew one thing. She would not allow herself to be buried in contempt. On her way home, Helena recalled the odd signs she had overlooked: Edward's evasive requests for money, Clara's cold avoidance, and her snide remarks that old people should rest and not meddle in serious matters, the suspicious withdrawals from her bank account she had never authorized. Piece by piece, they formed a picture. There was an agenda unfolding, and she had been deliberately pushed aside to keep her from interfering. Family should be the safest place, yet sometimes it becomes the most dangerous. A stranger may deceive you once, but betrayal by your own kin will shatter your trust for life. Helena's story is not just her tragedy. It is a warning. Be vigilant against greed and deception, even when it comes from those you love most. That night, Helena sat in her small home, the warm lamplight casting deep shadows across her lined face. She laid the note on the table and stared at it as though it were the only fragile lifeline in a sea of betrayal. She whispered, "If they are truly hiding a secret, I will uncover it. I would rather die than let myself be humiliated again." The fire of indignation had been lit, and from that moment on, her journey to expose the betrayal within her family had begun. Helena sat quietly in her small house, her eyes still fixed on the strange note with its chilling warning. The anger inside her did not fade. Instead, it rose like a furious tide, threatening to break everything apart. And in that moment, memories of the past came rushing back. She could not help but ask herself, why would a mother like her, who had given up her whole life, be treated with such contempt by the very son she had sacrificed everything for? Once, Helena was a young woman, full of hope, dreaming only of living peacefully with her gentle husband and raising a small family. But fate was harsh. Her husband died young in a work accident, leaving her alone with little Edward, barely a toddler. From that moment on, Helena became both mother and father. She forced herself to keep going, even when her heart was heavy with grief. The years of raising her son alone were filled with humiliation and struggle. She once knelt in front of a shopkeeper, begging to buy rice on credit. She stayed up all night sewing clothes for others just to pay Edward's school fees. Every callus on her hands, every strand of prematurely gray hair, was proof of a mother's boundless love. Outsiders might have seen Edward in warm clothes during winter or holding new pens at school, but no one knew how often Helena went hungry, how she drank plain water in the kitchen at night so her son could eat the next morning. Even when illness gnawed at her joints, she hid it, not wanting Edward to worry. Each time she watched him sleep, she whispered to herself, "I can endure anything, as long as he has a decent future." That belief was the only light guiding her through the darkness of life. As Edward grew, Helena spared nothing. She sold the only piece of land her husband had left, a place filled with memories, just to pay his tuition. Her hands trembled when she signed the deed, tears welling in her eyes, but she told herself, "Land can be lost, but my son must have a future." And now, that very son had turned his back, leaving her outside the church like a stranger. Thinking of it made humiliation choke her throat. She asked herself, "Is a mother's love worth so little? Were all those years of sacrifice just to be rewarded with a cold glance?" She remembered the day Edward graduated. Helena walked miles on foot because she had no money for a bus, just to hand her son a bouquet of flowers. He hugged her briefly, then ran off to pose for photos with friends, leaving her alone by the empty seats. She never blamed him. She thought youth needed its joy. But now, recalling it, she felt her heart ache. Perhaps, even back then, Edward had already begun to forget his mother's devotion. She also remembered the day Edward introduced Clara. The young woman was stylish, charming with her words, but her eyes flickered with disdain as they swept over Helena's modest home. Clara smiled, but beneath it was arrogance. Helena had felt uneasy then, but she stayed silent, hoping only for her son's happiness. And yet, instead of happiness, she was handed public humiliation. Do you see how unfair this is? A mother who once knelt, who gave up her health, her youth, her personal happiness, ends up being treated as a burden. This is not only Helena's story, it could be any mother's story. If you are hearing this, do not let your own parents taste such cruelty. Helena's memories cut into her heart like knives. At times she wanted to collapse, to surrender, but the eyes of her late husband in the photograph on the wall seemed to remind her, "You must be strong. If you give up, who will defend the truth?" The fire inside Helena was no longer a spark. It was a raging blaze. She knew that if she did not rise, she would be buried in shame. Her years of sacrifice could not be trampled like this. Clenching her fists, tears fell, but her voice was steady in her mind. "Edward, you may have forgotten everything, but I haven't. And because I haven't, I will not let you erase those years." That night, in the silence of her small home, Helena made her decision. She would begin searching for the truth not only to reclaim her own dignity, but also to honor the memory of love and sacrifice into which she had poured her entire life. After the wedding, Helena began to notice every small detail in her daily life. What she once dismissed because of trust now appeared like cracks on a shattered mirror of family. Edward rarely visited, but when he did, his demeanor had changed. He no longer hugged her warmly. Instead, he gave a stiff pat on the shoulder, more duty than affection. His eyes avoided hers whenever she mentioned the house or family assets. Once, when Helena softly asked, "Edward, don't you think we should keep this house as a memory for the future?" He only smiled faintly and replied, "Mom, everything has to change." It sounded ordinary, but to her it felt like a chill in her chest. Clara behaved as if the house already belonged to her. She opened the refrigerator, rearranged drawers, even rifled through the old wooden cabinet where Helena kept documents. When scolded, Clara smiled coldly. "I'm just helping you organize, Mom. You're old. What if you forget?" Her words sounded polite, but her sharp eyes sent a shiver down Helena's spine. One afternoon, Helena found a bank envelope addressed to her in the mailbox, already torn open. Inside was a statement showing large withdrawals she had never made. When she asked Edward, he snapped, "You worry too much." Maybe the bank clerk made a mistake. But mistakes do not repeat over and over. Clearly someone had intervened. Not long after, Mr. Wallace, the longtime neighbor, came for tea and told her he had seen Edward and Clara at the bank with a strange man, overhearing words like authorization papers and transfer of ownership. Helena's heart tightened. She forced herself to remain calm, but fury roared inside. Her fears were not illusions. The situation grew darker when Helena received a call from the bank, informing her they had been sent documents requesting confirmation of her mental competence. She froze. Who would file such a request, unless they wanted to prove she was unfit to manage her own life? It was clear. Someone was trying to strip her of her rights. In the days that followed, Helena lived with constant unease. Each car pulling up outside made her fear it was a legal officer. Every sweet word from Clara sounded like cold calculation. Every averted glance from Edward felt like a widening abyss between mother and son. These signs piled upon one another like bricks building a wall, transforming Helena from a mother who once believed in her family into a woman isolated in her own home. And that injustice did not only break her heart, it ignited a fierce determination. She would uncover the truth, no matter if it meant confronting her own child and the forces behind him. One quiet weekend afternoon, Helena found an anonymous envelope left at her doorstep. No sender's name, only one typed line. "If you want to know the truth, meet me at the Riverside Cafe at 5 p.m. Her hands trembled, but deep inside she felt this might be the only lead. She wrapped herself in her old coat, swallowed her caution, and left. The cafe by the river was nearly empty. A middle-aged man stood as she entered, introducing himself as Harris, a private investigator. He opened his case, laid a folder before her, and spoke slowly. "Before he died, your husband contacted me. He worried that the family property would not be safe, especially as he noticed changes in your son's character. I kept watching, and what I found is far from simple." Helena's heartbeat quickened. She opened the file to see photographs of Edward and Clara leaving a lawyer's office, holding papers clearly titled Property Transfer. Another photo showed them with a man who specialized in falsifying documents. Harris played muffled recordings, but clear enough. Clara whispering, "Once this is signed, the house and accounts will be completely ours. She's old. No one will believe her." Edward's cold reply followed. "The sooner the better. I don't want to wait." Every word stabbed into Helena's chest. She had never imagined her own child plotting to strip her of everything she built. Fury rose until it choked her. Tears welled but would not fall. Harris continued. Clara had a tainted past in another state, involved in a financial fraud case, escaping conviction by changing her name and moving away. "She is not the woman you think," Harris warned. "She doesn't just want money, she wants to prove you unfit. They've even discussed hiring a compliant doctor to falsify psychiatric records for you." Helena shook with rage. The strange call from the bank demanding verification of her competence suddenly made sense. It was all part of their plan. They did not merely want her property. They wanted to trap her in the role of a madwoman, silenced forever. Could injustice cut deeper than this? A mother who gave her life to her son, now cornered by that same son and his wife. Helena felt torn apart, yet in the midst of fury a voice within her declared, "They think you are weak, but they will pay." She raised her head to Harris, her voice hoarse but firm. "I will not let them succeed. Help me. I need proof as much as possible. When the time comes, I will expose them before everyone." Harris nodded with sympathy. "You are not alone. I'll keep following them and provide everything you need. Returning home, Helena gazed at her old house, once filled with laughter, now turned into a target for greed. But she was no longer a submissive mother. She knew the scheme had entered a dangerous stage, and she must be ready to fight. That night, sitting alone under the desk lamp, Helena stared at Harris's documents. Her heart ached, but her eyes blazed with resolve. "Edward, Clara, you chose betrayal. Then wait. I will be the one to tear off your masks in the light." From the day she met Harris, Helena was no longer the same. She was no longer the quiet mother enduring in her old house. Her eyes carried vigilance, her steps determination. She knew she was facing a cunning scheme, and if she did not prepare, she would lose everything. But Helena was not alone. She began by organizing every important document. Every folder, every bank book, even old letters from her husband, she sorted and locked them in a new safe in her bedroom, protected by a code only she knew. Each turn of the dial felt like reclaiming control over her life. She also started keeping detailed notes of every expense, every visit from her son, every word Clara let slip. She understood that one mistake could brand her as senile, so evidence had to be built piece by piece, like bricks in a fortress wall. Harris kept calling with updates from his surveillance. One day he sent her a short recording. Edward's curt voice to Clara, "We must finish quickly. I don't want Mother to suspect." Helena clenched the receiver, biting her lip until blood rose. Her son, once cradled in her arms, was now eager to destroy her. The pain was no longer just pain, it became fuel. Helena sought out an old friend, Margaret, a former court secretary. They had not spoken in over a decade, yet Margaret was willing to help. "Helena, I'll guide you to file protective measures so they cannot transfer property without your presence." Those words gave her strength. That night, Helena whispered to her late husband's photo, "Rest easy. I will not let them turn a lifetime of work into a mockery." In the dim light, her face was no longer that of a discarded mother, but of a woman ready to strike back. The next day, when Edward and Clara suddenly visited, Helena was prepared. Clara smiled sweetly, handing her a bundle of papers. "Mother, just a few forms, so it's easier for us to take care of you. Please sign." Edward watched from behind, expectant. Helena took them, smiling calmly as if unaware, but inside she resolved, "Let them think I am naive. When the time comes, the truth will shatter them." She did not sign. She only said, "I need time to read carefully. Important papers cannot be rushed." Clara's face flickered with irritation before she feigned gentleness. "Of course, Mother. I only worry you'll get tired." But Helena had already caught the glint of cold calculation in her eyes. As soon as they left, Helena called Harris, recounting every detail. Harris's voice was grave. "They are accelerating their plan. You must be ready to go public. When the opportunity comes, we will release all the evidence." Helena nodded, gripping the phone like a vow. Deep inside, she knew the battle had begun. There was no turning back. Every step she took from guarding documents to building alliances was a blade striking against betrayal. She no longer trembled. She was ready to turn her fury into a weapon. Helena's plan no longer stopped at defending herself. She knew gathering evidence was not enough. There had to be a public moment when truth exploded in the open, a moment that would leave Edward and Clara unable to deny or twist her into a senile old woman. That moment, she felt, was approaching fast. One morning, Helena received an invitation from Edward himself. "Mother, this weekend we're hosting a small party with friends to announce our new project. You must come." Reading it, a chill ran down her spine. Clearly, this was the occasion to declare their grand theft. But instead of fear, her blood burned with resolve. "Fine," she thought. "If you want an audience, I will give you a play you will never forget." In the days leading up to it, she and Harris worked tirelessly. Harris uncovered more proof. A video of Clara visiting a familiar doctor, slipping him a thick envelope and whispering, "Just sign off that she shows signs of confusion. We'll handle the rest." Another recording caught Edward's harsh voice. "My mother is too old, unfit to manage assets. This is our chance. Don't miss it." Harris had copies notarized and secured, safe from destruction. Helena spent nights arranging all the files, photos, and recordings into one leather folder. It was her shield and her sword. She no longer saw Edward and Clara as family, but as traitors about to face judgment. The evening of the party arrived. Edward's luxurious villa glowed with lights. Guests in fine clothes held glasses of wine. Helena entered in her simple dress, but her eyes shone fiercely. Clara rushed to greet her with a sweet smile that masked unease. Edward looked surprised. Perhaps he had not expected her to come. "Mother, I'm glad you joined us," he said warmly, but Helena only nodded. The party began with Edward's announcement. "Tonight I want to share our new project, beginning with consolidating all family assets to create strong capital." The words were knives aimed at Helena. Clara added smoothly, "Our dear mother Helena has agreed to sign authorization so we can manage everything. From here, we'll build a glorious future." At that moment, Helena rose calmly. All eyes turned. Her voice was steady but clear. "Excuse me, I have never agreed to sign anything, and I think it is time everyone here knows the truth." The room fell silent. Edward froze. Clara paled. Helena opened her bag and laid out the folder, photos, documents, recordings. She pressed the small speaker Harris had given her, and Clara's voice filled the air. "Just sign off that she shows signs of confusion." Then Edward's voice, "My mother is too old." Shock rippled through the guests. Some stared, some shook their heads in disgust. Helena fixed her gaze on her son, her words trembling with fury. "Edward, you wanted to steal the work of my lifetime? To brand me insane for your convenience? Have you forgotten the years I carried you alone?" Edward stammered, "No, Mother, you misunderstand." But Clara cracked, shouting, "Enough! She has nothing legal." Just then Harris entered at the door, holding notarized documents. "On the contrary, she has everything. This file proves the plan to falsify papers, bribe a doctor, and seize property unlawfully." Murmurs erupted. Some guests hurried away, unwilling to be involved. Edward and Clara flushed with humiliation. Helena stood tall, her hands trembling but her eyes aflame. "I have been silent too long, but tonight, before you all, I declare, you are no longer my son and daughter-in-law. I will deliver all this evidence to the law." The room grew heavy with dread. Edward turned pale, speechless. Clara tried desperately, voice shaking, "Mother, you're ruining everything." Helena met her eyes coldly. "You destroyed yourselves." In that moment, Helena felt a surge of power unlike anything before. Years of sacrifice and humiliation were released in the act of exposing the truth. She knew the legal battle was still ahead, but the most important step was done. The truth had been unveiled in public. After that fateful party, the whole town buzzed with whispers. News spread quickly. neighbors and old friends gossiping endlessly. Helena, once accustomed to living quietly, now found herself the subject of every conversation. But unlike the shame she had feared, this time she felt no humiliation. Instead, relief coursed through her. At last, the truth was out. The next day, Harris and Margaret accompanied her to the police station. The thick folder of evidence was handed over, every page and recording documented. The officer on duty looked at Helena with seriousness. "Don't worry, this case will be fully investigated." For the first time in years, Helena felt the law protecting her, no longer alone in the dark. Word that Edward and Clara were under investigation spread swiftly. Business partners distanced themselves, clients withdrew funds, and those who once flattered them now looked with disdain. The proud couple became desperate, living in fear. Helena, once cast aside, now stood tall. She needed no violence. The truth itself turned them into losers. In the days that followed, Helena spent time restoring her home. Every old object and photo seemed to whisper, "Enough suffering. Now it's time to be free." She carefully stored precious memories and discarded what reminded her of pain. In the brightened rooms, she felt her spirit cleansed. She began to rediscover herself. Helena joined the Women's Book Club, where she listened and shared. She opened a small sewing class for young women, teaching them independence. Whenever she saw their shining eyes, she felt a new purpose. Love is not bound to blood alone. It can be given to anyone who values it. Edward and Clara were brought to trial. The hearing drew a crowd, for such blatant betrayal within a family was unheard of. Helena sat in the front row, calm. She was no longer the trembling mother. When the judge declared them guilty of falsifying documents, conspiring to seize assets, and fabricating mental illness, she felt justice had spoken. Her eyes met Edward's. For a fleeting moment she saw the innocent boy once nestled in her arms, but the memory vanished, replaced by the man bowed in shame. After the trial, many approached her, shaking hands, congratulating. "You are so strong." Helena smiled softly. "I am not stronger than anyone. I just refuse to let injustice bury my life." Life gradually settled. Helena sold part of her remaining land and used the money to create a fund supporting elderly victims of abuse by their children. She named it the Earnest Lantern, in memory of her late husband, a reminder that light always exists even in the thickest darkness. Each evening she sat in the garden where roses bloomed, sipping tea as the sky turned to dusk. Her heart no longer carried hatred. The scars remained, but they had become marks of pride. Now Helena understood. Freedom is not merely the absence of chains, but the ability to live truthfully, to hold your head high without fear of denial. She had lost the son who once meant everything, but she had reclaimed her dignity, her true self, and that was the greatest victory of all.